Adam, in having the pleasure of working with some, let's just say, legacy businesses and some legacy software, we have come across a lot of interesting situations. I think one that sticks out to me is the time that we found a setting just precariously turned on for one of our clients unknowingly, where their database essentially would, if it was ever turned off, delete, go back to their last backup essentially. And surprise, their last backup didn't occur or hadn't occurred for over 3 or 4 years. So they would have been, if it didn't destroy their business, they at least would have had thousands of hours of manual printing off, putting back into their system. So when we did that legacy assessment, why did we first start with the database, if you can remember?
Yeah, so typically when we try to work with somebody, the first thing that we have to answer are all the basic questions, right? Like, where does the data live? Is this application hosted? Is it just a desktop application? Who has access to it? And so in answering that, we got some answers about where this thing lived. And it lived right there on AWS. And so that was kind of the start where we just started digging and we started, all right, what are the configuration settings? What do the backup settings look like? Disaster recovery, what's in place? And it turns out there was no disaster recovery.
Yeah. And I think that's the scariest part of anyone, again, looking at assessing, replacing, or rebuilding, or doing something with their legacy system, especially if it's for a business, because there can be these ticking time bombs that, especially if you're non-technical, you don't even know that these things are running in the background or even enabled, because maybe the developer that built it is long gone. Maybe they retired. Maybe they passed away. Maybe it was a previous owner and you bought the business and you acquired that software with it. So it's really hard to determine, when these things occur unless you hire an expert to define that. So I'm trying to remember, help recollect or help remind me of, like, how did that all go down? Because I remember this was a CEO of a 40-year-old membership organization serving hundreds of thousands of members worldwide. And this is the bread and butter. This is the backbone of their business. So when she came to us, I remember it being focused on, okay, we have this old system that was built by someone else who's no longer here. I acquired the business and acquired the technology. I just know that it doesn't work. Most of it doesn't work. Most of it's broken. And even the stuff that does work, it's just not efficient. But I remember we kind of took a step back and go, okay, well, let's really evaluate the data first. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So the reason, like you mentioned, the reason that we started even talking to them is because the software just wasn't doing what they needed it to do, right? It was creating more problems than it was solving for them. And they actually trusted it so little, they still kept paper records of everything. So the reason we engaged with them in the first place was to figure out, how do we make something better? How do we make a system that's actually tailored for the way that your business runs, for all the nuances and little details? And so where we start with that is, what do you have currently? And so whenever we saw what they had currently, we were like, great, cool. How do we get the data out of that, right? Because when you're building a new system, you have to keep all the data. It doesn't make sense to build a new system if you don't bring along all of the information, because that's the value. In fact, that's what we do. We literally build a brand new application around your legacy data. And so, of course, that's tricky, but you need to know, where does that data live? And as we were, they had this old Visual Basic 6 application, and the database basically ran on this AWS EC2 instance. For the non-technical people out there, it's just a server, right? It's just out there in the cloud, and they have a hard drive attached to it, right? Just like any computer, you store things on the hard drive. But things can get a little bit weird in the cloud, and there are reasons why they decouple the volume from the server. So their data's living on this volume. There's servers running over here and they're connected, right? They had a setting enabled for reasons unknown to anyone that if that server was ever turned off, don't keep the volume over here running so that you can connect it to a new server or whatever. Just delete it. Just drop it. Just get rid of it entirely. And when we saw that, we immediately hit the brakes. We were like, hey guys, like we have to solve this first, because to say nothing of, like what if we mess up? Of course that's a concern, but then there's the other concern of like, if AWS decided that they were going to do some maintenance and shut this server down, your data's gone. And that was over 3 years. Now, for a 40-year, business, it might seem like 3 years of data, but I mean, that's 3 years of data. Like, imagine trying to go back and reconstruct what happened in your own financial life if you lost 3 years of your financial history, right?
Yeah.
Impossible. It's impossible. I don't think it's crazy to say that would have destroyed the business. Yes, they had paper records, but I think thousands of hours, I think that might be underselling it. Like, there's no telling how long it would have taken to get the business back into ship shape. So this was existential.
Yeah.
So yeah, so when we saw that, we pumped the brakes. We said, hey, legacy modernization, like we want to do that. We want to build this sleek, fancy new application. Which, side note, we did do. It's there. It's awesome. But we knew that we had to make sure that there was no way that data could be lost in a disaster or some sort of catastrophic failure.
Yeah. And then how long do you think that was sitting like that? Or how long do you think that was enabled?
I mean, my best guess is that it was like that from the get-go. I don't know why, but that is the default setting. The default setting is that, hey, if I shut this server off, terminate the volume, or sorry, delete the volume that is connected to it. And so it was probably just there from the get-go, and whoever had set it up originally just didn't know that setting existed.
And I guess what's the takeaway from this? I mean, obviously, this is bridging the gap a little bit of the technicalities for someone who may or may not be that technical. So, is there really any way for someone in this legacy system assessment phase trying to determine what to do with their legacy software, legacy database, on at least just ensuring, or maybe even AWS and cloud, on just ensuring like, hey, how do I make sure that I'm not in this situation as well, unknowingly?
So I think the important thing is that you have a disaster recovery plan. Like, you need to ask yourself, what would happen if this happened, right? What would happen if this office burned down? Take a catalog. What's in here? Do I have backups? What if my laptop's here? Do I have backups? Do I need backups, right? Like, for some people, it might be like, well, that's unfortunate, but all my data is backed up in the cloud and I can recover everything I need. Great. Then your disaster recovery plan might be very simple. Same thing here. Here's our legacy database that has all of our data. What would happen if that database disappeared? Do we have backups? The next question is, how often do we take backups? Where are those backups stored? What is the redundancy? And then the final question is, can we simulate that? Like, can we actually do a fire drill, right? I mean, in school, we do fire drills so that, God forbid, if the thing ever happens, it's so rote, it's so routine that like the kids just know what to do. They've done it before. They've heard the alarms. It's kind of like that stress inoculation. Same thing for your business. Like, okay, let's pretend the database just disappeared. Where do I go? What buttons do I click? How do I get this thing back? And then make sure all my people can connect to the application and do what they need to do their jobs. If you're not doing that, I mean, once a year, once every other year, something like that, if you haven't ever done that, you have prayers and you have hopes, but you do not have a disaster recovery plan.
Yeah. And I think AI could help bridge this gap and formulate at least some of this documentation. So when we're talking about AI being able to, as we've seen, bridge the gap of technicalities for someone who isn't technical, and where they could really build their own business software and get pretty close, if not get there, depending on how specific the technical requirements or workflow might be, to where they can or can't just run it out of the box based off what they just create themselves. But when we're talking about this kind of redundancy, these plans, how could AI fit into this to where they could use it, utilize it to create some of these plans?
That's a really good question. I think it's something that people should do. I think that people should use AI because this is deep, right? I mean, we are in an industry that is such a complex, deep industry, but there are things that are making that more accessible to people. AI is one of them. And I mean, you can literally just open your AI of choice, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, whatever it is, and you can say, hey, help me build a disaster recovery plan for my business. It's that simple. It'll ask you some questions, where your services live. And guess what? Those are good things that you should probably know anyways, because that's a lot of stuff that we kind of have to put on our archaeology hats a lot of times whenever we go to work with these clients, because they don't know where the application is hosted. They don't know what developer built it or who has the keys or what are their contact information. We have to
Part
go.
of our service is just hunting. Who is it? Give us their contact information. We'll beat them down their doors, get the answers for you. But yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So AI can walk you through putting together that disaster recovery plan, and then you can actually run the disaster recovery plan. Like, again, just ask AI. AI is a great professor. Say, hey, if I wanted to simulate a disaster and figure out how to recover from it, what do I do? How do I put that playbook together? And AI will walk you through it. You just have to do it, right? You just have to actually like take the steps, ask the questions, and have AI do it. Or you can hire us.
Well, I guess without naming names, how close was this to being a real disaster for that client?
It's hard to know. It wasn't. They could not have done something. As far as I know, there was no way that they could have like clicked the wrong button and told AWS to blow up their server. But it is a big question mark, right? Like the solution of creating your disaster recovery plan is so simple. Like turning off that setting, enabling backups, all that's so simple. It's less a question of how close was this to becoming a disaster, and it's more a question of how little does it cost you to make sure it is never a disaster. And so it's hard to know, right? Like AWS, these are real machines running somewhere in a data center. And things happen, right? The power goes out, disks will fail, you'll have hardware failures. So if the machine that your application is on fails, I actually don't know. Like, I don't know how AWS would treat that. Would it treat it as a termination, which then deletes your volume? I don't know. I'm also not willing to risk my 40-year-old business on that question. I'm going to put a disaster recovery plan in place.
Yes. It actually opens up another line of thinking. A lot of these legacy businesses, again, that we work with, are usually 40, 50 years old on average.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
And if that is the case, if it's at least 20 years old, the likelihood that they have some kind of server on premises is pretty likely. So how would you tailor that suggestion of creating a disaster recovery plan or doing some of this diagnostic work themselves if it's not on the cloud and it is on premises or on-prem?
So we don't want to overcomplicate this, right? It's still a pretty simple, straightforward set of questions, and you might not know the answers. You might have to go and do some research to find the answers, but they're simple questions. So you have a server right here in your office. What happens if the office burns down? Can you run your business? What does the server and for every business, the answer is going to be different. For some, it might be like everything is down, everything is gone, nothing can run, and we are in deep, bad water. And for others, it might be like, oh, well, it just does some like marketing automation or something like that for us. And it would be painful. It would be bad, but it wouldn't be catastrophic. So then the next follow-up question is, well, what would you fall back to? Do you have another server that's at a different physical location? What happens if a drive fails on that server? What happens if if the power goes out? Can people access your website if it's hosted on that server? So they're really just simple questions of like, what if? What if this happened? What would we do? What if the drive failed? What would we do? And the answer might be like, well, we would run a backup. Great. Next question. How often do we run backups? A
Right.
lot of modern databases, they do point in time database backups. Like for all of our clients where we run their services, we have to the minute point in time recovery. So for example, if something happened and they were like, oh my gosh, I just created a catastrophic error, we can actually go back to the minute across the last, I want to say 48 hours and restore their database to a certain point in time. It's not a perfect solution, but it's way better than saying like, well, we only back up our database once every 3 years, right?
I think it's the most practical thing you could suggest to making sense of this for someone who's non-technical is like, what does that even mean, database backup? Well, it's just literally taking a picture of what the data, what the application looked like at a certain point in time. So if you're doing it frequently, awesome. That means that, maybe it was a few minutes ago and you lose a few minutes of data, if no data at all. Or in the case of our client, that last backup was 3 years ago, meaning that you lost 3 years of changes and additions and subtractions to that data. So that's just ultimately what that means. And I think the perfect thing that you suggested in there is, creating this plan and evaluating based off your unique situation, because it's not just out of the box. Well, I have an on-premises server. I can see it right there. Well, I need to do a cloud backup. Maybe that is the answer for some, or maybe the answer for what if the power goes out and our website's hosted on it. Maybe it's like, well, actually, we do have a backup generator, so that would keep going for another day. And it sounds a little silly to think about. Well, we're talking about technology, but these are the real world situations in scenarios that you have to define, because it's not always just, well, I need a cloud backup or I need another server. Sometimes it's, again, thinking through, and the purpose of thinking through these situations is really defining what does that practically look like for my unique business, our unique situation, our unique server, our unique setup, because everybody's different. There's no out of the box solution for any of this.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about redundancy, it just comes down to how important is it, right? If you've got 40 years of organizational data, I mean that is a treasure. That is your business. That those are the receipts, those are the relationships, those are the notes, those are the records that define your business. If it costs you an extra $100 a month to have two different cloud backups on two different cloud providers and to have a team on call that, if something happens, you can pick up the phone and they can fix things for you. Um, is that worth it? I would say almost universally, almost across the board.
It's life
At a
insurance
minimum,
for software.
that's what it is, man. It's life insurance for your business. It's how do you make sure that when the worst happens, you are not left sitting with literally nothing.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts, suggestions, or things you didn't get to mention that you like to mention now before we close, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give us a shameless plug. Like this is what we do day in and day out, and there are many of these things it doesn't make sense to go it alone. At a minimum, it makes sense to have a team, even if you're not paying them month to month to do development work for you. It pays to have somebody who knows your system intimately that you can pick up the phone and talk to them, to the humans, like you can with us, so that somebody can jump in and make things happen. And we have clients who things have gone bump in the night and they pick up the phone and they call us and they say, hey, I've got an emergency. This thing's happening and people can't pay us, or this system is down. And that is a peace of mind of knowing that you have professionals on tap that you can call anytime. I would say the reduction in anxiety is probably worth the price tag alone. So anyone can do this. It is not that complex, but having people who do this is just a peace of mind. I mean, our own clients, as they've told us, like it's just a peace of mind that is almost always worth it. So, shameless plug. I think that that's something that every business owner should have, right? Like we don't review our own legal language. We contact a lawyer, right? It's not that we don't have the tools and we couldn't use AI and we couldn't really look at it and do research and figure all these things out ourselves. It's just the peace of mind of knowing, yeah, you know what? Somebody else does this for a living and they've got it covered. So
That's exactly right. Well, this is great, Adam. Thanks again, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks for watching.